Today we are reading Island Princess in Brooklyn, Sun Pebbles Pleasure Series by Diane Brown, and from Carlin Publishers, dedicated to Mandy Allen. Hope I don't mispronounce it. Solange, Christopher, and Rachel. Series editor is Hazel B. Campbell. We are just going to be reading the first 2 chapters. Hello, America. Would my mother be there? This thought kept bouncing around in my brain like an echo in a cave, over and over again, even though I tried to keep it away. I left the terminal building at John F. Kennedy Airport. Why am I reading like this? And the wind whipped me around, right around. I wasn't expecting it, and it was cold, like no cold I had ever felt. It was colder than when I lived in the mountains with Granny, and the deep fog would settle and hold everything like a giant in its big hand. It was colder than when the Christmas breeze was blowing and the red leafy heads of the poinsettias would bob and weave a beat to the breeze, and Granny would pull her sweater around her and say, "What a wet cold this morning." I held on to the coat Mom had sent me with one hand, trying to pull it shut, and with the other I pulled my bag behind me. I was more anxious than excited. What lay ahead of me? What if something happened to my mom and she didn't turn up? For a moment, I had forgotten the airline lady walking beside me. She would have to hand me over to Mom. I was an unaccompanied minor, so somebody had to be in charge of me. Picture. Do you see your mother, Princess? The lady asked. She had a kind voice, but I pretended I hadn't heard. That I was concentrating so hard on looking all over the place that I couldn't possibly have heard. I pretended because I was afraid to answer. What if Mom didn't show where she was to come meet me? What if Mom really didn't come? What if she had forgotten that I was arriving today? Would the lady have to take me back inside? Would they send me back home? I was almost breathless at the thought. Then suddenly I saw Mom waving to me from across the road. She ran to me calling out, "Princess, Princess!" Then she was hugging me and laughing, the sort of laughing that you know could become tears at any minute. Her coat felt cold and warm all at the same time. What a sweet picture. And she smelled nice and foreign, American. It was a smell I remembered from the barrel she sent every year. And suddenly I was no longer anxious, just happy and excited. Mom was excited too. "How was your flight? Your first time on a plane? Just imagine, I can't believe you're really here. I'm so happy you're here at last." She said this all in one breath, and the tears were sitting in her eyes. Eyes but did not spill over. And I laughed and kissed and said, "I'm here," loudly into the wind. And before I even realized it, Mom had thanked the airline lady and signed the paper to say that she had received me safely. Just like I was a parcel. I almost laughed out loud at the thought. I knew I sounded happy and excited. For the moment, I forgot Granny's warning. Everybody's talking about the American dream. Take care, it's not a nightmare you're going to have. Mom said, "Normally we would go by the subway, Princess, but as a treat we're going to take a cab. Besides, it's a cold day, even if it's only September, and you're new to the cold. Is that coat warm enough?" Mom was chattering on and on in her excitement. I wondered if it was like this in September, what it would be like later. It got colder than this? But of course it did. I had seen it on TV, America covered in snow. When we found out that I was really going to live with Mom, Granny and I had watched more American TV movies than usual, searching for clues to Mom's life, which would soon become mine. We lined up to get the cab. Mom shouted our address to the cabman as if he didn't understand English. He's probably from some place like the Middle East, some place like Lebanon or Egypt, or somewhere like that, princess. A lot of the newcomers who don't know much English drive cabs. Everybody comes here for the American dream, she added with pride, as if he were personally in charge of shepherding them past the Statue of Liberty, like St. Peter guided people through the pearly gates of heaven. I did not think of all of this all by myself. I wish I had, because it was quite funny really. Granny had said it one of the times when Mom came home and was telling us about all the joys of being in America. We whizzed along roads with more traffic than I had ever seen, all going so fast yet staying in their lanes. The driver probably had really just come to New York, because Mom had to keep giving him directions to our address in Brooklyn where she lived, what street or avenue to get there, and since it seemed he really did not speak much English, this became a shouting conversation from time to time, each of them trying to outshout the other in a way that suggested the other person was an idiot. I looked out, and at first, to tell the truth, I was disappointed. Everything seemed brown and gray. Even the trees seemed to be more gray than green, more stiff branches than leaves. The buildings were a muddy gray-brown color. Then they began to look more interesting, built of brick and close together, and I was just beginning to relax, thinking that this was a real New York after all, the one we saw on TV, when I realized that Mom was speaking to me. Her mood had changed. She was hesitant. "I have something to tell you," she said. My heart skipped a beat. Oh my gosh. I thought because those words are always a signal that something is wrong. And when grown-ups use it, it means that decidedly it's worse than anything you could imagine. Then she said in a rush, her voice falsely bright and her face strange, as her mouth tried to smile and her eyes looked frightened. "I'm married and you're going to meet your new stepfather soon." Chapter 2, Bombshell. Okay, I thought. None of this is real then. I'm only dreaming, right? Married? Stepfather? No, that couldn't be. I had only left Jamaica a few hours ago and Granny had not told me anything like this. Normally, when I am very shocked or surprised, I don't say anything, or at least not what anyone would expect me to say. So I just looked at her. I could feel my eyes opening wider and wider with shock. And the wider they opened, the more the strong features of my mother's face became blurred. I knew that my mouth had fallen open. I felt as if my face was doing all this by itself and my mind was separate from it and looking on in amazement. She repeated what she had said firmly and defiantly, as if I was about to challenge her. "I'm married and you like him. He's a nice, respectable man." Married, but Granny didn't tell me that. My voice came out as a frightened squeak. I was feeling faint, like I sometimes do. Mom says they are nothing but panic attacks, but since I'm way too young to have them, they aren't real anyways. "Your Granny doesn't need to know everything," Mom replied. Her face was now set as if the skin was stretched tight over her bones, as if her face was carved from the smooth black rock of our four mountains, and in a tone she usually used with Granny, not with me, added, "Actually, I have been married for some time. I didn't see the need to tell your Granny or anyone else." Did that mean that Granny wasn't told because if Granny knew, she would not have let me get on that plane? Was anyone else referring to me? I didn't wonder that my mother hadn't shared this information with me. I just wondered how Granny didn't know. I was very frightened by the sudden information and what it meant. When Granny, Cousin Esther and I had set out by cab before day, when the silver light of morning was just beginning to touch the grey water of Kingston Harbor. I had been so excited. Everybody we knew and everybody at school had said how lucky I was to be going to America at last. Even when Granny had hugged me hard and long and said, "Take care of yourself, honey bunch, and be a good girl," and I could feel the sadness in her heart. And when Cousin Esther had hugged me quickly saying, "Good luck, princess," I had still been excited. And then just as I was going into the terminal building, it had suddenly hit me. I was leaving the people I loved most and who loved me most. My eyes had been shiny with tears and I was trying my hardest not to break down and cry. And all of a sudden, I began to worry that a mistake was being made. I began to feel that I should turn back before it was too late. And I had looked at Granny for help, but she was just waving and bravely trying to smile. I knew I had to be brave too. And then when I was actually leaving, going with the lady from the airline to board the plane, I had wondered if I could still escape and run back through the long, never-ending building shouting, "Granny, Granny!" But I had known I couldn't. There are just some things that you know you cannot do. I had to go to my mother. I belonged to her and she had sent for me. Of course I loved her. It would be wicked not to love your mother. But when I asked myself, do I like her? I didn't know the answer. I didn't know her well enough to tell. And now here I was with her. And there was this major thing that I didn't know about her. She was married and for a long time too. How could that be? And now I really felt faint, and I would have fainted too, I'm sure, except that the cab driver had taken a wrong turn and he and Mom started shouting at each other again. Then, almost without notice, the cab came to a stop. The driver said with a scorn, "See, right address, no?" Mom merely caught her eye at him as she paid him and said to no one in particular, "It had to deal with some of these people, you see, man. Home, my new home, and already something was very, very wrong. Granny's words were coming true. This was all just a big mistake."